Welcome to A Course in Miracles, where you'll discover health and well-being through inner peace. Your host is Eloisa Ramos, EFT master and author of Beyond Self-Esteem, Discovering Your Boundless Self-Worth. Using EFT, the Ramos clearing technique, and the principles of A Course in Miracles, you'll learn how to open your mind to healing and to all that is inherently yours: deep fulfillment, vitality, joy, and inner peace.
Hello and welcome. My name is Eloisa Ramos. How many of you can tell when someone is treating you differently based on external differences? Does this feel uncomfortable or perhaps even degrading? Is this discrimination or social inequality? I have had people make assumptions about me based on external differences, but I have also caught myself doing it to others I did not know. The focusing of our attention on external differences and the judgments made based on those differences happens in such an automatic way, often unconscious, that it can feel like it is part of our nature. But can our judgments somehow tell us the truth about who someone is? Today we are going to explore this question and why we judge others based on external differences, and whether it is possible to perceive perfect equality in the world. Most of us would agree that if someone bases their treatment of us on their judgment coming from external appearances, it means they do not really know us, and they are making false assumptions about who or what we are. We know intuitively that such assumptions keep them from really knowing us deeply, and since it is these assumptions that determine the treatment we receive, the treatment will feel fake, even if it's positive. This can apply to any treatment based on any type of differences, not just gender, skin color, age, nationality, education, income, social position, title, celebrity status, criminal record, living condition, etc., but all the way to how we dress, what brand of car we drive, the color we paint our house, or the school we attend. We all intuitively understand that differences between people do not tell the whole story of who someone is. When it comes to knowledge and knowing someone, the picture we paint based on perceived differences can not only be a tall tale, but can completely miss the mark. But how is it possible to not know ourselves as we are, so that we can misjudge or misperceive ourselves, others, and God? Let's begin by exploring perception versus knowledge to understand where and why our judgments miss the mark. Page 40 says, quote, "We have been emphasizing perception and have said very little about knowledge as yet. This is because perception must be straightened out before you can know anything. To know is to be certain. Uncertainty means that you do not know." Unquote. Perception involves the gathering of information coming from our limited physical senses. This information is then given interpretation based on our past learning. Perception is personal and subject to change precisely because it uses interpretation. We can give different interpretations to the same scenario because we can look at it from different angles or points of view. Dr. Dwayne Dwyer would say, quote, "If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." Unquote. This is because the temporal changing world we see is made by perception. Knowledge, on the other hand, is absolute and non-changing. We call it truth with a TH because it applies universally without exception. It offers us certainty because it is eternal and without opposite. It resides at the spiritual level beyond perception, where there is only wholeness and perfection, since there is no separation. Page 42 says, quote, "Perception did not exist until the separation introduced degrees, aspects, and intervals. Spirit has no levels, and all conflict arises from the concept of levels," unquote. We need perception to see separation and inequality. We can distinguish objects as separate from one another by looking at differences in degree and aspect. For example, there are varying degrees of intensity in temperature, emotions, brightness, etc., and things appear to us in a variety of shapes, sizes, tastes, textures, sound, etc. We say with delight, variety is the spice of life, and perception is what we use to notice differences, which makes for variety. We also perceive intervals between things in space and time, and this shows us separation. Our perception organizes and sorts things into levels and categories. There are social hierarchies, animal hierarchies. Even the food pyramid is a hierarchy arranged by levels. Spirit, being one, has no levels and includes all of life without separation. And in oneness, there can be no conflict. Perfect peace is then recognizable to the mind that perceives its oneness with spirit and all of life, because it cannot attack nor conflict. This picture of oneness is what perception can offer us when we let go of our willingness to be separate. Our perception will have been corrected and be in alignment with spiritual truth. However, it still cannot give us certainty, since perception is not knowledge. Page 41 says, quote, "Knowledge is the result of revelation and induces only thought. Even in its most spiritualized form, perception involves the body. Knowledge comes from the altar within and is timeless because it is certain. To perceive truth is not the same as to know it. Right perception is necessary before God can communicate directly to his altars, which he established in his sons. There he can communicate his certainty, and his knowledge will bring peace without question," unquote. True perception, or right perception, perceives truth, and this is necessary before knowledge can be received through revelation. Knowledge is spiritual truth and a direct communication from God. Perception is often described as a veil that covers our awareness of knowledge. The more clear the veil, the closer we come to perceiving truth, but it will still be perception that comes through our physical body's senses. Revelation is direct communication with the mind. It bypasses the veil of perception because it does not involve the body. It only induces thought, not action, since the body, which acts, has no reality in truth to spirit. All action is induced by perception. Judgment and interpretation, which are subjective and inconsistent, are inherent in perception, and this is why our behavior varies. To misperceive is to misjudge or misinterpret a situation or the individuals involved. This is why there is varying and conflicting testimony from witnesses to the same crime. The meaning or interpretation each gives to what they saw is quite unique and personal. Lawyers understand this very well and give much care to the individuals they select to be on jury, for the benefit of their clients, of course. When they present their case, they want jurists whose point of view leans in favor of their case. They understand each individual gives personal meaning to the facts they are presented with or that they witness. Knowledge does not need to be given meaning through interpretation. It has inherent meaning that is self-evident. For example, in the preamble of the U.S. Declaration of Independence, it says, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." When the Declaration of Independence was written, the authors were not relying on their perception and judgment to tell them that all people are created equal in truth. At that time, inequality was the norm and slavery was an acceptable business practice. They understood, however, that truth can only be self-evident because it is beyond perception. Perception is not self-evident, though we may want to believe it is. Anything coming through our physical senses requires interpretation. The meaning of what we perceive depends on the interpretation we give it, and we have learned how to interpret things in particular ways. When we teach children to name things with labels, we are teaching them to perceive like us. It is an unconscious collective agreement of how to see things in a particular way, and we teach and support that. Why all this is important when we look at issues of inequality, prejudice, discrimination, or unequal treatment is that these issues have nothing to do with knowledge. We think they have to do with knowing a person and treating them accordingly, but we often confuse perception with knowledge because we have come to see our judgments and interpretations as truth with a TH. Let's take a couple of examples to explore this. Just recently, a couple of young men were bicycling in our neighborhood and found themselves lost. My son was in the backyard and overheard their conversation. One said to the other, "I think we're lost." Then he said, "Oh, take a look at that house." He was referring to our house. The other replied, "Yeah, that's a hippie house." So, when my son told me, we laughed. Our house tends to stand out for people because it's painted in bright colors, in comparison, of course, to the colors of the surrounding homes. To give you an idea of the colors, my daughter said it looked like a pineapple. I generally do not have a problem with people's reactions to the colors of the house. However, though the comment, "It's a hippie house," was funny, there was also something disturbing to me about it. It felt personal, like the individual labeled the house based on assumptions about who or what type of people owned the house without knowing. On the other hand, I had another person say to me, "It's like an artist's house." When I heard that, I understood that she was looking at it as if it was a painting or a piece of art and did not feel judged. I could see she was telling me it was her way of interpreting what she was seeing, since she was standing right in front of me and looking at the house when she said it. There's an important distinction to make between the two comments. "That's a hippie house" is a judgment spoken as a statement of fact or reality. When we make a matter-of-fact statement, we are making a declaration which we believe reflects truth with a TH. We are saying, this is not subject to question. It is reality and self-evident to all. We are implying it reflects knowledge and certainty. On the other hand, the comment, it's like an artist's house, is also a judgment, but it's not stating a fact. The person is making a connection in her mind of similarity to a house she can picture an artist living in or of having painted it. She's taking in the sensory data of the colors and giving them her personal interpretation. Her judgment is her opinion and does not imply that it says anything, neither about truth nor about knowing us. All labels involve judgments and are not knowledge. So, can we know anyone with perception? Page 40 says, quote, "The miracle, being a way of perceiving, is not knowledge. It is the right answer to a question, but you do not question when you know. Questioning illusions is the first step in undoing them. The miracle or the right answer corrects them." Unquote. To know our brother, we must first perceive him correctly. The miracle is the right answer to our question because it corrects our false perceptions and offers us a true way of perceiving. But we need to begin by questioning our illusions, since it is the first step in undoing our misperceptions. Let me give you another example to illustrate this further. About a year ago, we had some new neighbors move in. I was walking by their open garage and had not met them yet. What caught my attention as I was walking by was the boat they had parked there. As I kept walking, I caught myself imagining all kinds of things about the type of people the neighbors were, solely based on their ownership of a boat. This is no different than the cyclist assuming we were hippies because of the color of our house. But as I became aware of my thoughts, I could see I was making them up and imagining they were true. A boat was no real cause or basis for knowing anyone. Nevertheless, it felt like I wanted to hold on to those assumptions because there was something very comforting about them. Believing these thoughts felt like I did know the neighbors, and they were no longer strangers. It gave me a sense of familiarity. So, making assumptions about others without a real basis seemed to solve a problem for me. But what problem? A Course in Miracles says there's only one problem, the problem of separation. Let's see if this problem was really solved. A couple of days before, I had looked out my kitchen window and saw the moving truck unloading across the street. I thought to myself, I wonder what kind of neighbors they're going to be. I did not question this thought at first. It seemed like a perfectly natural thing to wonder about. But once I started to look at why I thought I knew my neighbors based on superficial made-up assumptions, it brought me back to this question. What kind of neighbors are they going to be? There was uncertainty in that question, and because of the uncertainty, there was doubt. The doubt was very well camouflaged as curiosity. It felt like I was just naturally curious. I could not detect the fear. that was there. But could I have firm confidence in what the neighbors would do without knowing them? No. This takes us back to our last program titled Miracles as True Perception. Not knowing my neighbors brought up fear because there was a possibility they were not wholly loving and good. And we said that when we do not have firm confidence in what someone will do, we will be afraid, and this blocks the power of the miracle. When I wondered what type of neighbors they were, there was hidden fear of the unknown there. It is the fundamental fear that because I cannot be certain of who or what you are, nor who or what I am, there is doubt that our true nature is perfect and totally innocent. Because I have not made a firm commitment to what I want to believe you and I am, I got myself stuck in a dilemma. There was fear around having new neighbors. In order to not have that fear, I needed to release it and know them. However, I did not want to go meet them so I could get to know them precisely because I was afraid. Fear is supposed to keep me safe by limiting what I do. The job of fear is to keep me separate, as far away as possible from what I perceive as fearful, and thus safe. I am supposed to hold on to separation for safety, but when I do, I still do not feel safe, since I'm still fearful because I have not resolved the issue of not knowing my neighbor. The right answer to my dilemma may be self-evident to you at this point. You may say, "For God's sake, Eloisa, just go over and meet your new neighbors and get over your doubts." This, however, was never an option in my thinking. The right answer the miracle offered me was inconceivable to my ego, since this would require releasing the separation, and my ego is the belief in division and separation. So, instead, the ego offered me an ingenious lie to keep the separation. It suggested that I could know my neighbors through misperception or miscreation. After all, I could see they owned a boat, and that meant they enjoyed nature, fishing, being with friends and family. By seeing them in my imagination, as I wished them to be, these thoughts made them safe and familiar to me. My problem of not knowing them was magically solved. This was why those made-up assumptions about the neighbors felt comforting before. They offered me a temporary solution to my fear of the unknown, and they did it while maintaining the separation. I was left with no desire or reason to go meet my neighbors now. I could just pretend I already knew them, believing my misperceptions were knowledge. It is not just negative assumptions we make up about others that keep us separate. The positive ones work just as well. It is all made-up illusion. In reality, we can only know others and ourselves as we are, not as we wish to be. But our fearful ego thinking would disagree and assure us We can be anything we wish to be because we can perceive ourselves and others in that way, disregarding reality and truth. We can believe any assumption we want about others and ourselves, and it will be true for us alone. Though it completely misses the mark of truth and has no reality in the mind of God. Page 42 says, quote, "The ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish to be, rather than as you are. Yet you could know yourself only as you are, because that is all you can be sure of. Everything else is open to question." Unquote. This is where all our difficulties come from, including the difficulty we have with being judged and judging others on false assumptions based on external differences. The problem of inequality is the one and the same problem of separation. We want to hold on to the idea that we can be as we wish to be, not as we are. We want to be the ones to define ourselves and others. This is the desire to be self-created, and it keeps us willing to be separate and holding on to our misperceptions. No one really likes fear, uncertainty, and separation, but that is what it takes to believe we can be self-created. Page 40 says, quote, "The Bible tells you to know yourself or to be certain. Certainty is always of God. When you love someone, you have perceived them as he is, and this makes it possible for you to know him. Until you first perceive him as he is, you cannot know him." Unquote. Lack of love is fear. When we are in fear, the solution is love. When we are afraid of our brother, letting go of the separation is the choice for love. This is how we make it possible to know him. When we love someone, we have perceived them as they were created, perfectly loving and innocent. When others misperceive us, or we misperceive others, we have the choice to forgive these misperceptions. This is the choice for the miracle. When we are willing to know the truth, we will be willing to let the separation go. Our mind opens to the miracle, which corrects our error in perception. We choose forgiveness instead of the grievance because we see that misperceptions are made up and not real. We have difficulty with inequality, prejudice, and discrimination because we do not know ourselves as we are, and so cannot know others. We have confused misperception with knowledge. Page 40 says, quote, "All your difficulties stem from the fact that you do not recognize yourself, your brother, or God. To recognize means to know again, implying that you knew before." The problem is not that we do not have knowledge of the truth of what we are. The problem is that we have been denying the truth for so long, holding on to our wish to be as we want to be, that we need to come to know again what we knew before. It is often called a remembering for this reason. One way to remember and recognize ourselves is through the practice of forgiveness. The practice of forgiveness can open our mind to recognize the truth of what we are because it heals the separation. Page 46 says, quote, "Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. Correct perception of your brother is necessary because minds have chosen to see themselves as separate. Spirit knows God completely. That is its miraculous power. The fact that each one has this power completely is a condition entirely alien to the world's thinking. The world believes that if anyone has everything, there is nothing left. But God's miracles are as total as His thoughts because they are His thoughts." Unquote. Knowledge tells us we are perfectly whole and complete and one. This is why we are perfectly equal as we were created, and inequality is just a perceptual illusion in our mind. This may not be self-evident because we are split and also giving value to our wish to be self-created. This is but to assign value to illusion, to nothing. All wishes to be other than how we were created do not create. They only make the unreal. We have spoken about the distinction between creating and making in previous programs. We cannot see that distinction, however, until we are willing to question our thinking and assumptions. When will we question our thinking and assumptions? When we get tired of fear and the false solutions we make up for our only problem, which is separation. With this, we conclude our program for today on perceived differences and inequality. Until next time, blessings to everyone.
For more information about EFT, muscle testing, working with Eloisa, and to download a free version of the Ramos clearing technique, visit www.healingwitheft.com.